Since stylishly stealing the show during the all-digital Sony PlayStation 5 event in June 2020, Deathloop has topped many a gamer's most anticipated list. Initially revealed at E3 2019, the first-person action-adventure game from Arcane Studios combines gameplay elements of the studio's previous games, namely the Dishonored series and Prey. As suggested by the loop part of the title, action in the game takes place over the course of a limited, endlessly repeating day. And while the notion of the time loop isn't novel, it is a surprisingly contemporary trope that just might, dear viewer, have grown in popularity thanks to the very media in which it appears. Follow along as we take a trip down, around, and back up through the rabbit hole. Time, the ever-flowing river. Or in the case of 2021, the limited yet unlimited body of water that goes in a circle. So like a lazy river, you know, the ones they have at all those hotel pools in Vegas. While it's not quite as happening as the infamous Sin City, Deathloop does find our hero Colt trapped on the island of Black Reef where the party never stops. I mean, what else would you create an infinite time loop of a single day for? The player is tasked with taking out 8 targets collectively known as Visionaries across the island before midnight, or the loop will reset. On top of that, they have to contend with Juliana, an agent hired to take Colt out to preserve the loop. Time loop is a hot trope in 2021. Oh yes, that's right, viewer. Deathloop is not the first, nay, even the third offering in this particular subgenre. The PlayStation 5 exclusive, Returnal, which dropped in April, making it the first offering of this variety, incorporates the concept of the time loop with roguelike gameplay. In it, Astra agent Celine crashes her ship on an off-limits planet where she is shocked to discover corpses of herself. Every time she dies, she goes back to the moment she crashed. In the grand roguelike tradition of procedurally generated dungeons, every time she ventures out into the hostile alien world again, the terrain and threats are altered. The loop in Returnal is only reset by death, but Celine retains her memories of the events leading up to it, even if the world around her seems to change. Which, hey, like, I guess if you're gonna be stuck living the same sort of sequence of events forever and ever and ever, as long as you keep dying, you might as well be somewhere where you never entirely know what's gonna kill you. You know, just the right amount of change and routine to have some stability, but keep things fresh. The recent rise in time loops in games can be traced back to the 2019 indie darling Outer Wilds. The space exploration title from Mobius Digital features a real-time time loop in which the player explores a solar system which is destroyed and reset every 22 minutes when a star goes supernova. Gameplay here is all about repetition, and the player must take what they learned from the previous cycle into the next in order to uncover the mystery and stop the star from exploding. It's your traditional, you've already lived this once, so how can you do things differently and get a different outcome kind of loop, with things like the launch codes for your ship remaining consistent throughout, allowing you to bypass the learning step once you've learned it once. A number of other standout indie titles have embraced the time loop trope, including another 2019 release, ELSINORE, a point-and-click adventure starring Hamlet's tragic heroine Ophelia, and Minute, a peculiar little adventure played 60 seconds at a time. But let's break free of this micro loop and turn the clock back to 2015 and climb a little deeper down the rabbit hole, where it was actually an award-winning mod of a AAA title that rekindled a long-defunct spark for time loops in games. Australian gamer Nick Pierce first discovered his love for mods while playing Some Guy 2000's Fallout New Vegas mod, New Vegas Bounties. In 2012, he undertook the gargantuan project of creating one of his own, and 1,700 hours over the course of 3 years later, The Forgotten City, a mod for Bethesda's mega-popular Skyrim, became the first game mod to ever win an award from an internationally recognized Writers Guild. Pierce passed up numerous job offers from AAA studios both in his home country of Australia and in the US, and instead founded his own studio, Modern Storyteller, in 2017. Their first project, an independent version of Forgotten City, now set in ancient Rome rather than a forgotten Dwemer, Skyrim's version of Dwarves, ruin, with an updated, expanded script and multiple endings. And when was this critically acclaimed, hard-hitting tale of complex human morality released? July of 2021. So, oh no, we have to go back.
You've got to come back with me! Where?
Remember, Deathloop is the 4th time loop game to hit, let's be honest, mostly digital store shelves this year. So what's the third? Oh, just a little indie game with an A-list celebrity voice cast, including James McAvoy, Daisy Ridley, and Willem Dafoe, that Metal Gear creator and notorious gamer auteur Hideo Kojima said kinda makes him want to create another adventure game. That game is, of course, 12 Minutes. Released August 19th for PC and Xbox, 12 Minutes takes place over the course of 12 minutes, with a man arriving home and learning his wife is pregnant. Just as they begin to celebrate, they're interrupted by a cop accusing her of murder, who kills them both, which sends the man back 12 minutes in time just as he's arriving home. The real-time time loops featured in both 12 Minutes and 2019's Outer Wilds were both directly inspired by what any millennial gamer will tell you is, without a doubt, the most iconic and bizarrely unsettling time loop game of all time. And that will finally, truly take us deeper down the rabbit hole. No, stop it. I can count to 10. I know how to count to 10. I don't need you, Bunny Hood! In the year 2000, Nintendo released Majora's Mask, a direct sequel to the mega-hit Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, featuring young again Link undertaking a personal quest to find his fairy pal Navi. Along the way, he is attacked and cursed by Skull Kid, who he follows into the parallel world of Termina and winds up in a 3-day in-game time loop, 72 minutes in real life, as he tries to unravel how to break the curse, defeat Skull Kid, and stop the moon from falling and destroying everything. By playing the Song of Time on the ocarina, Link can transport back in time to the beginning of the first day. He can also use music to manipulate the flow of time, the weather, and quick travel around the map. In addition to some seriously unsettling wearing of dead people as masks and assuming their identities business, Majora's Mask was the first game to feature the time loop as the central gameplay element. The concept was present in earlier games, notoriously the punishingly difficult Ghosts and Goblins, wherein you were doomed to replay the last 2 levels endlessly until you found a cross to confront Satan, which would then send you all the way back to the beginning, forcing you to play the whole thing again in order to actually beat it. But Majora's Mask was the first title to use the time loop system specifically to make the game itself more compact while still offering complex gameplay. According to Zelda director Eiji Aonuma, the time loop was actually inspired by a German film, and that, my friend, leads us even further down the rabbit hole. Tom Tykwer's 1998 experimental thriller Run Lola Run tells the story of a woman who must acquire 100,000 Deutschmarks in 20 minutes in order to save her boyfriend. Nominated for numerous awards and winner of the World Cinema Audience Award at Sundance in 1999, the film has been parodied by such greats as The Simpsons in the 2001 episode Trilogy of Error, and visually referenced by the likes of Bon Jovi, Yellowcard, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. While the team behind Majora's Mask was likely inspired by the German Run Lola Run due to the film being released around the same time the game would have started development, if they had looked a little further back in Japan's own pop culture timeline, they would have discovered that the time loop existed therein long before it ever turned up in international film festivals. The Girl Who Leapt Through Time by Yasutaka Tsutsui was originally serialized in a Japanese youth magazine from November 1965 through May of 1966. In it, third-year middle schooler Kazuko Yoshiyama leaps backwards in time following a series of catastrophic events, and then, upon learning to control this ability, goes back in time 4 days to unravel the mystery of her own power. It's been adapted numerous times for film and television, notably the 1983 film, which was the highest-grossing film in Japan that year, but was relatively unknown in the West before the release of the 2006 anime film from director Mamoru Hosoda. Following the success of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, the time loop trope became commonplace in Japanese media, featured in films and series throughout the 1980s, including Urusei Yatsura 2, Beautiful Dreamer, and Kimagure Orange Road. It's also the central conceit of Hiroshi Sakurazaka's 2004 light novel, All You Need Is Kill, which served as the basis for the 2014 film Edge of Tomorrow. But that's getting ahead of ourselves, or backtracking maybe because we're going backwards in time. Who cares? It's an infinite loop, so let's make like The Girl Who Leapt Through Time's Kazuko and leap to the year 1996, our next official stop on our way down the rabbit hole. In 1996, Elf Corporation released a visual novel entitled Yuno, A Girl Who Chants Love at the Bound of This World for the Nippon Electric PC 9800 series personal computer. In it, protagonist Takuya travels through parallel universes to solve the mystery of his parents' disappearance. Yuno was notable for its use of the Automatic Diverse Mapping System, or ADMS. Whenever a branch in the storyline nears, an indicator on the in-game reflector device blinks, and once the player makes a choice that advances a particular route, it gets recorded in the divergence map. Using the jewels that power the map, the player can save right before important decisions are made and quickly return to that point to make a different choice. However, unlike save scumming, where you're saving in a game and then making a different choice and playing through a totally independent save file, with jewel saves, you're actually traveling back in time to that moment and retaining any key items and information you obtained playing through your first choice. And herein lies the manner in which Uno makes use of the time loop. The success of Uno had a major impact on the development of future visual novels, including the Fate Stay Night series, which many Westerners were first introduced to via the 2006 anime series, which brings us back to the year in which the anime film version of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time debuted in theaters in Japan. Hosoda's version is a pseudo-sequel about Kazuko's niece Makoto, who discovers she only has a limited number of time jumps, which she spends frivolously to do things like get perfect grades, avoid an awkward love confession, and relive a single karaoke session several times over. Thus, it's a little bit more of a morality tale than the original work, warning us not to squander our time, even if it seems unlimited, a lesson that ultimately leads to the breaking of the time loop. And yes, you knew it was coming. Some of you have probably already been yelling at your screen for 5 minutes about it. That classic Bill Murray, Andie MacDowell comedy, Groundhog Day. Released in 1993, directed by Harold Ramis, it tells the story of arrogant, cynical weatherman Phil Connors, who ends up mysteriously reliving the same day, Groundhog Day, over and over again, and through it embarks on a journey of self-growth and redemption. Arguably the most well-known piece of media to make use of the time loop, it is directly referenced in the film Happy Death Day, which explores this storytelling device in the form of a slasher film, in which heroine Teresa Tree Geldman relives the day of her death repeatedly until she can uncover the identity of her murderer. It also served as a jumping-off point for the script of 2020's Palm Springs.
It's one of those infinite time loop situations you might have heard about.
Groundhog Day began its life as a spec script for writer Danny Rubin, whose agent wanted him to write something he could use to gain meetings with producers following the sale of his first script, Hear No Evil. Rubin wanted to explore the idea of how and if a person could change if their time was limitless. In order to make the script producible and not call for expensive historical set pieces, he instead chose to portray eternity as a single day lived over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Rubin's initial fascination with the idea of what a person would do in the face of eternal life was actually inspired by Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles. While reading the 1985 novel The Vampire Lestat, he began contemplating vampire immortality, questioning when or if there would come a point wherein life would be boring or meaningless. However, there was someone else out there who was convinced that Rubin, Ramis, and Columbia Pictures had blatantly stolen what he deemed to be his idea. And that, dear viewer, will plunge us further still into the depths of the rabbit hole. The December 1973 issue of a science fiction magazine featured a short story by Richard Lupoff called 12:01 p.m., about a New York exec who relives the hour of 12:01 p.m. to 1:00 p.m. on an endless loop. Adapted into a short film in 1990 starring the dad from That 70s Show, aka Kurtwood Smith, Lupoff and the film's director Jonathan Heath were outraged by Groundhog Day, claiming they had ripped off their idea, but after 6 months of meetings with lawyers, they decided to drop the lawsuit. And honestly, the idea wasn't exactly novel at the time of 12:01 p.m.'s publication in '73. Remember, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time had already been published in Japan, and while sure, that ultimately becomes a self-imposed time loop, Kazuko's first leap back is involuntary. And predating that even was a short story published in Unknown magazine in 1941 entitled Doubled and Redoubled, which is thought to be the first piece of science fiction to feature the time loop trope with a man living the same single day of his life on repeat. Other early examples of the time loop in literature admittedly come after Lupoff's story, including Philip K. Dick's A Little Something for Us Tempenauts and Stephen King's Dark Tower series, the first of which was published in 1982. But there was something else on the rise at the time the time loop began to make its way into books, films, and TV shows, something that has, in the year 2021, gleefully embraced the trope and incorporated it into at least 4 projects. But in the end, is it not just mimicking the very foundation upon which the medium was built? In 1978, Taito released Space Invaders, the first blockbuster arcade title, which set the quality standard for numerous games to follow. Between 1978 and 1981, such arcade classics as Asteroids, Galaxian, Pac-Man, Galaga, and Donkey Kong followed. By 1983, Nintendo had launched the cartridge home-based console, the Famicom, which would be redesigned as the Nintendo Entertainment System and released in North America 2 years later. Video games were, and remain, interactive experiences where a player's choices and hand-eye coordination using a controller or mouse and keyboard allow them to navigate levels, puzzles, battles, and stories. They progress through the game until they run out of lives and reach a game over, at which point they start again, at the beginning. Sure, Pac-Man doesn't remember accidentally allowing that ghost to, ghost him to death. But the player does, and now has the experience of dying to attempt to avoid dying the same way the next time. So really, if you think about it, you, as a player, are actively engaging in a time loop every time you play a game. The very principle of games is that you can always try again, from a checkpoint, a save, the beginning, and this time you have the advantage of knowing what's going to happen. Just like if you were to say, wake up and live the same day over again. And so, dear viewer, now you can see that the bottom of the rabbit hole leads us right back up to the top. Thus are we forever trapped in a cycle of self-referential media.